And thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out today. I'm with Florian. I was very nice to see you at CES. It was a nice surprise to bump into you.
Yes, absolutely. And I enjoyed CES a great deal. I mean, after last year's nearly no CES, this CES was a very good one with a lot of attendees. It was great fun.
Yeah, it was nice because I was in the HDMI.org booth with my colleague Tom, and we were showing off some test equipment for 8K, and we were doing some 4K 120 gaming through a fiber extender with 284 meters of fiber with no latency, doing 4K 120 gaming from an Xbox. It was pretty sweet. So we got to see some really cool stuff at CES. It was really fun to be in the HDMI booth just to kind of get a taste of what they deal with on a daily basis. And it was really funny because a lot of people were coming up to the booth and they were complaining to the HDMI people about HDMI. And we're like, guys, you know, it's the information's out there and it's not that difficult. But you know, we get people all the time that say, I just want to go back to component video, and it becomes sort of a joke. But you know, there's plenty of reasons why we can't do that, of course. But yeah, it was just really interesting to see it from their point of view. So lots of cool stuff. There was some really good displays. We saw the 97-inch LG OLED. That was nice. Hisense had a really good booth. TCL had a really good booth. And it seems to be there was a lot of chatter about 8K, which is kind of why I wanted to talk to you today. I knew you've been doing 8K for how long?
Oh, I started 8K in like 2015, 16. So that's really early. I used a F65 camera from Sony. So that's actually a 8K times 2K camera.
Right.
And then I switched over to like the Red Ranger and the Blackmagic 12K camera. It's amazing how many professional cameras we nowadays have that can do 8K or more.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I try to teach people all the time that, you know, cinematographers have been shooting 8K for a while, but you know, it has to be compressed down to 4K in a lot of cases. But and you tell me if this is on point or not, but it seems like guys like you perhaps are going to be able to go back one day and take your 4K master or your 4K copy, I should say, and go back up to 8K, which it was originally shot in. And when we have things like these 97-inch OLEDs, and you want a nice immersive, you know, 30-degree viewing angle and all the rules we try to follow, I bet you're excited.
Well, see, the point is, I get to see a lot of like DCI and movie content that I receive in ProRes formats, and a lot of it has been shot in, you know, with 8K cameras. And as you say correctly, we have the situation where the final deliverables are in 4K, sometimes even in 2K. Okay.
Right.
But so most of the movies that we see are 2K, 4K, and it's more and more 4K actually. The funny part is, I think there is always this kind of misconception about the value of 8K in regards of what do you need as a content, because basically we need to see that 4K, which is in a digital cinema format, is much better than the 4K that we see at home. And that all starts basically with, you know, the chroma subsampling. You know, we have a fraction of the chroma resolution in our 4K deliverables. So if you are seeing Ultra HD Blu-ray or any other like OTT from Amazon or Netflix or Disney, whatever it is, it's always delivered as a 420 signal. And therefore the chroma channel is compromised in terms of resolution. And you know, that's I always see, you know, people discussing about these, oh, what was the native resolution, and we need it natively from A to Z. But you know, basically that's not the point. We want to maintain the full resolution of everything we captured up until it's delivered to the end consumer. And basically we need the headroom. Okay.
Right.
So I remember when we had Avatar, when it came out, it was shot in HD. That was quite amazing for me, right? It was such an expensive movie.
Sure.
And basically it was captured in 1920 1080. That was funny, you know. And then I was visiting, what was it? I think Company 3 that time in Hollywood, and they had so many deliverables for different theater projectors and everything. But I
Hmm.
asked, you know, what do you do about, you know, sometimes you have a microphone, you know, hanging in the picture, you know,
Yeah.
and 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 yes, they need to crop it out, they need to zoom into the picture and everything. So on the acquisition side of things, it makes so much sense to have a lot of headroom, you know, to
Hmm.
be able to zoom in, to to do something to the picture. And and when you have a native 4K, you know, DCI deliverable, and want to bring that to the home theater, you always need to be aware that, you know, the chroma channel is compromised. That's a very good reason, by the way, for having Ultra HD Blu-ray, the 4K one, even when there's a 2K DCI master, because that's the only way how you receive the full chroma resolution. But, you know, enough of that. I
Yeah.
chroma resolution 4:0 is, you know, is well under respected in my opinion, and it's
Yeah.
important to do proper chroma upsampling. You know, there's a lot happening there.
Yeah, and it's funny because you know, we talk about we teach about 420 being what's on the disc and what's on the streaming content and all these things, but a lot of times when you're looking at very, very fine detail on the screen, and a good example is just text on the screen, 420, you can start to see some of the flaws.
Exactly, and it
So,
gets even
sorry.
worse when we are in the world of HDR,
Right.
because it really destroys some of the levels, and you need some proper pre-filtering in order to avoid that you have these overshoots in the HDR levels. It's a long story. Maybe we don't want to go into detail here, but
Yeah.
you know, it's 420 is a compromise. I really think that we need to have headroom, and you know, 8K is just another way of having headroom at all sorts of pieces of the workflow. It starts with the camera side and also the processing side, even the display. You know, if you do sharpness enhancement, you know, okay, yes, you shouldn't do it, but many people do it, right? If you do sharpness enhancement to some extent, and if you do it in the native resolution, you always compromise the original content that's in the picture. When
Right.
you do when you have a higher resolution screen, you can actually do things without losing original detail.
Hmm.
Um, that is a benefit. I'm, you know, from like an engineer side, I'm always a fan of having headroom. You know, some signal headroom.
Right. Florian, just to give you a quick heads up, I don't know if it's mine or your end, but I just turned off your video, but we still have audio. The picture's
Okay,
kind of
so
cutting in and out, so I
okay.
wanted to just make sure. If everybody can't see us anymore, I just turned our cameras off. No
Okay.
big deal.
Yeah, I'm sorry about it.
No, it's okay.
I
It
don't
could be
know if it
on my
comes.
end too. No worries at all. So
Yeah.
the beauty of live broadcast, right?
Right.
As you know, I mean the Olympics in 2020, we were supposed to see some really cool stuff at the Olympics, and that all got squashed. That was probably it was heartbreaking for us. It was probably very heartbreaking for you.
Yeah, I mean, 8K, in order to do it right, it's really a challenge. We have to be honest about that. You know, people expect that, you know, now we have an 8K screen, we have a 8K signal transmission. We should see 8K in every single picture, but we
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah, right.
And we cannot expect it. Again, it's all about having some overhead, and you know, basically what I would like to achieve with 8K is getting rid of the pixels, because you know, I don't want to see pixel structures.
Right.
No matter if I like zoom into some footage or if it's on the TV side, you know, because of, you know, chroma subsampling issues, whatever is going on,
Hmm.
I don't want to see the pixels. And the best chance of getting rid of the pixels is an 8K ecosystem. And it's not always about this high spatial detail.
Hmm.
I would really disagree to, you know, to people who would say, yeah, 8K, that's because of that fine detail. We've learned that it's, that's not the case. We have the headroom, we have on the TV side, we have the most powerful processors,
Hmm.
and the brightest TVs and everything. It's all about, the best devices out there and getting rid of the pixel structure. That's more what 8K is all about for me.
Yeah, the a mind-blowing thing for me, because I had never seen it before. At the TV shootout with Value Electronics a couple of years ago, we had, we always have an 8K TV nowadays, but we had an 8K TV, and we were showing off the scaling capabilities, which I think is very, very important when you're upscaling from 1080p or from 4K up to 8K. Having all those pixels to work with and the more powerful processing, we have less jagged edges around things, and the upscaling's very, very good. But we had native 8K content on a hard drive in HDR. So for the first time in my life, I saw native 8K HDR
Yeah.
content on a native 8K HDR TV. And I'll tell you, Florian, I was, I have a pretty good eye, man. I've done this a long time, and I almost nose to the screen. We always say that as an exaggeration, but I'm not exaggerating this time. Nose to screen, and I couldn't see pixels. It was absolutely wild. And when you backed off just a little bit, you could still read. This particular shot was, I believe it was New York City, and it was maybe a helicopter shot down. I think it was one of Phil's shots, actually. And
Hmm.
on the top of the taxi cabs, you could still read the numbers and the letters. And there was a woman. There was a woman walking down the sidewalk, and you could see she was carrying a purse. I mean, we're talking a helicopter shot from way up. But even just looking at 4K content, 8K TV, if you were still nose on screen, it was you could start to tell it was scaled. But man, you
Yeah.
backed off just a couple of feet, if that, and it was just it was just awesome. So we talk about 8K content, and it's the same conversation, man. I mean, I remember when 4K was new, and there's no content, there's no sources. Well, now there's lots, and I
Yeah.
have a feeling
Yeah.
we're going to see that with 8K. That what question I had for you is thinking about the delivery system with 8K. I've done just like a little bit of research on this, and it seems like we're going to need so much storage space. Do you see 8K being a disk media, or do you see it being streaming only, or what do you think?
Yeah, we won't see a 8K disc. It's very unlikely that we will see another physical disc coming up. Unfortunately, because I'm doing a lot of disc work,
Yeah,
I've HDR remastered more than 30 movies now. So I got the theatrical versions and made HDR versions out of it in Dolby Vision, in HDR10 Plus, or in hybrid formats.
yeah,
And I really believe that the physical disc format, of course, has the highest bitrate and the best picture
of
quality.
course, sure, sure.
Because with the OTT, I have to say it depends on where you are on the planet, of course. But
Hmm.
the results that you're getting are very volatile. Meaning, sometimes I see movies that have a lot of compression artifacts, a lot of
Oh, sure,
macro blocking.
right.
Where I can immediately see, hey, it has been encoded, but no one has used HDR optimized psychovisual models, for example. And
Hmm.
then also, if you stream with 15 megabits or less, I mean, compare it to what you have on a disk, most likely 70, 80 megabits for the picture alone. Um, that's a huge difference in the picture quality. So I would like to see 8K streamed in this kind of a bandwidth, but we don't often see something like that happening. What I would hope for is some sort of storage within TVs and players to temporarily download an 8K program and then watch it and
Hmm.
delete it afterwards. So you can actually have a decent bandwidth. But again, coming back to physical media, I don't I don't see it happening. I that there is nothing going on in that area. It's
Yeah, and
unfortunate.
I still buy a lot of discs, and one thing that I've seen lately is we're looking now at movies that are a little bit older that have been, you know, whether they're remastered or whatever, they look really good. And I'll just give you an example. The UHD version of Jaws looks awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because they sat down and really spent the time cleaning up the film and going frame by frame and things like that. So when we talk about old film, what do you maybe see as a potential with old film movies being, you know, redone, if you will, into 8K?
Yeah, so there was for a long time there was a discussion about like how much resolution does um, analog film actually have, and
Right,
you know, we had these 2K scanners, then 4K scanners, and now we even have 8K and beyond.
right,
Basically, what you need to, you know, be aware of is that film grain is basically, you know, chemical drops of
right,
different sizes,
sure.
and some of those drops can be very, very small. I mean, much smaller than a single pixel in 8K,
Hmm.
actually. Depends on the
Hmm.
film material and everything. But more importantly, it doesn't follow a fixed grid. That is, you know, what that is the problem that we have in our digital world. Still, you know, it is a grid structure, and
Right,
therefore, if you do some upscaling, for example, you also need to be aware of, here needs to be done some anti-aliasing, for example. You know, we don't want to have these jagged edges, and in order to
right.
handle it correctly, we need to look into every scene, and that's basically what I'm doing when I'm HDR remastering movies as well.
Hmm.
There are decisions for every single scene. I don't with, you know, the rays of artificial intelligence and everything, things are getting smarter and better, no question about it.
Hmm.
And I think even the upscaling algorithms will get better. But we will also see with AI, we will see content that's not originally in the picture.
Right.
Because AI upscaling basically means that, hey, here's some missing information. AI put it in and make a new picture out of it. It can look quite good, especially when it's applied to, you know, only small parts of the picture, and some textures like, yeah, grass, whatever, you know,
Sure.
it. But there is no perfect recipe, and I think we will still see different manufacturers doing different things in their upscaling. Um, and do we need to be worried? I don't think so. First, first of all, I don't want to see the jagged edges. You know, I
Right.
really get disturbed when I see these like flickering lines, things like that. I don't want to see them. And it's not a solution for me to get further and further away from the screen because I want to see a big
Sure.
picture.
Sure.
So I want to stick to the like ideal 45 degree field of view. That is what I would like to, you know, see for a good movie. Um, and that should be combined with seeing no pixels. So um, yeah.
We talk a lot about viewing field of view in degrees, and you know
Yes.
it's always been you know, THX has a spec, SMPTE has a spec, but it all seems to land into this maybe 40, maybe 30 to 40 degree number. And I notice, you know, just doing some experimenting at home, sitting closer, sitting further away, with 4K is like a 65-inch TV. I can be about 5 or 6 feet away, and it still looks pretty good. But you know, you start getting closer to that, and what I like to call
Yeah.
the point of failure is like what you mentioned before, starting to see pixels. So if we want these immersive images and we want to be able to sit closer to bigger screens, we need the resolution. But as we kind of mentioned before, if we're watching older content, we might not get the clarity. But if the upscaling is very good, then we will. So it seems to be kind of this combination of not only the physical pixel structures of the TVs and how many pixels are there and how they're made, but also in the powering of the processing. And I have a feeling, and maybe you've seen this and you can touch on it a little bit, we have some manufacturers out there, and this is no secret, who do very, very good processing, and other TVs out there that the processing is just okay. So what I hope to not see is older content that's remastered very well, but the upscaling on the TV is not very good. So you're really not getting the full effect anyway, which is my whole argument of why we should be, encouraging, especially for if you're an integrator, why we should be encouraging our customers to spend that little bit of extra money and get the TV with the better processing. So I feel like it's just a combination of a lot of different things, but when you get it all right, it's a lot of fun.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. It's so many things that are combined, into the 8K viewing experience. For example, 8K in SDR is a completely different story than 8K in HDR. The
Sure.
need for 8K in HDR, of course, is higher than it is in SDR, and
Mm-hmm.
we also, I mean, not everyone has 2020 vision or better
Sure.
or even
Right.
close to it.
Right.
So if you don't have anything close to 2020 vision, and if your viewing distance is a little bit further away, then you don't need to bother about an 8K TV. That wouldn't
Right.
make any sense. But if you are a purist, if you're someone who's really into picture quality and wants the best available picture and picture processing out there, yeah, maybe it's worth looking at 8K TVs, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there are so many areas where 8K makes a great deal of sense. I mean, let's talk about, for example, the new Macs. I don't know if you heard it, but there's the new MacBook Pro. That's
Right.
currently available, and it's the 2023 model, which costs, I think, about 2.5K or so, and it has an 8K output. So
Mm-hmm.
the HDMI can do 8K. Same for the Mac Mini in the current generation. And looking at things like Google Maps, I mean, that
Oh, sure. That's
it's
a great example.
yeah, or all your photos that you've done over the years. I mean, let's be honest. How many people have been shooting still images like crazy over the past years? Maybe a DSLR, maybe even a very good phone, and only looked at it, on a very small screen. Now imagine you can connect a silent small PC to your TV and see it in its nearly full resolution. So
Mm-hmm.
that makes a great deal of sense. To me, that's a very, because you can even get closer. You can
Right.
take a look at your DSLR pictures in the very fine detail, just like you said with the taxi, and reading the number plate, whatever. Finding
Mm-hmm.
finding details in people shots, for example, is something where my little daughter is she's amazed when she sees images with a lot of people in it, and then she can
Mm-hmm.
sit in or stand in front of the screen and find the different face expressions. That's that sort of stuff that's really, really funny and amazing to see on an 8K screen.
It,
um, yeah.
think of all the people out there who have a DSLR or have a nice phone, as you mentioned, and don't even realize that they're shooting above 8K because they look at the image on their phone. But
Yeah.
in today's day and age, with the screen sizes and the pricing especially is crazy. I feel like a 77-inch, 75-inch, 85-inch is kind of the new 65.
Yeah, it
So
is. It
when you're
is.
going, I'll give you a good example. I'm an avid, I would say, enthusiast of photography. I've had a camera in my hand since I was a little kid,
Uh-huh.
and some of these newer phones are shooting very well. And I can take a picture with my wide angle lens on my phone right now, and I can zoom in and see a lot of detail. So as you mentioned cropping before, which I love that you mentioned that, I can take this super high res image and I can zoom in and I can crop and still have a super high res image. So if I'm at a beach and I can see the individual, if I can look at, let's just say, the sand, or if I can look at, say, the water, and I can zoom in and it's not blurry, that's a big win. because I can crop now and I can take this chunks of the picture that I like, and that's what I might print out and put in a frame and put on the wall. But
Exactly.
your daughter example is very good. I mean, we're starting to see now. I mean, this is still out of reach for most normal people, but we're seeing these giant crystal LED monitors from like Sony and all these modular systems that Samsung is doing, and now TCL is doing, and now LG is doing, and not just these giant modular walls, but just video walls in general. I was teaching last week at a facility that had a 2x4 video wall, so it was ultra wide, and these were all 65-inch panels. So when they're looking at this was at an integrator's place. So when they're looking at wiring diagrams or architectural drawings and things like that, like your Google Maps analogy, you can zoom in really far and you can see it. So we have all the pixels in the world to work with to do whatever we want with. And taking a lower resolution, because we have so many pixels to work with, we're seeing some upscaling that's awesome. So sitting closer, bigger screens, being able to zoom in and crop, upscaling from low resolution to 8K. It's just, it seems like with more tools in our hands, the more people like you can really make your content shine.
Absolutely, but it's even people, you know, who purchased a DSLR at some point, because 4K is 8 megapixels. I mean,
Right, right.
we need
That's
to
nothing now
remember
in a
that
camera.
that's
Yeah,
nothing. You would never purchase a DSLR camera with 8 megapixels. No one
right.
does that. But why? I mean, what is the average screen that, you know, people are looking at when they browse through their images?
Right.
It, get this 8K screen connected like the MacBook to it, and I mean you can use a PC like the I think the NVIDIA cards. The cheapest one is like the RTX 3050, which is $300 or so. It can do 8K
Yeah,
as well, so you can connect your
right.
PC and maybe, you know, put all your images into Lightroom and enjoy something more than 8 megapixels. And
Yeah.
it's so funny that so many years after we've seen the first 8K TV. I mean, how long is it now? Maybe
Oh gosh.
3. Yeah.
Um, I have a Samsung here in my office. The panel is 8K, but the only way to see 8K on it is with like a USB drive. But the panel itself is 8K, and I want to say that was maybe a 2019 model, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's possible. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, watching content like still photos are
Mm-hmm.
predestinated for 8K. And you know, diagrams, detailed sketches, whatever. You know, there are so many use cases, in my opinion,
Right.
for 8K. And yes, it's maybe not the Olympics. I have to be, you know, I have to be sharing my opinion here. I think it's more like the still content, like where
Right.
there's not too much movement in the
Right.
picture. Like
Sure.
beautiful landscapes, for example, are amazing in
Yeah.
8K. I've done the first 8K documentary actually for German television.
Oh,
That was 2 years ago now,
yeah. Right.
and it was of course combining footage that had lower resolution as well, but
Mm-hmm.
um, we wanted to make a point. You know, it's possible to do it. It's possible to combine and even HDR and SDR combined everything, and it is possible. It's not for someone who produces, like in the post production world, who wants to do an 8K production. It's totally possible now. You may not have the perfect preview possibilities, but there are solutions around it. Like you can easily zoom in, you know, from time to time, and in general work on in a 4K domain,
Mm-hmm.
and double check what you've done in 8K by zooming in, or cropping, better said, you know, cropping, and there is, of course, nowadays we have ways of seeing 8K as well. I mean, for example, you can use such an NVIDIA card and have it connected in with your as a preview monitor in
Right.
Resolve. So it is possible to even with a TV to preview the 8K, and you can still have. That's basically what I do very often. I have a consumer
Hmm.
TV connected to the system. In addition to my HX310 mastering monitor.
Oh
So
yeah.
the main monitor is the HX310 that I'm using,
Hmm.
and then I'm connecting different consumer TVs to see
Hmm.
what it might look like at consumers' homes.
Florian, let's try, and we can always turn them off, but let's maybe try to fire up the cameras again, because I know you've
Sure.
got some cool stuff behind you. It looks like you're in your workstation there.
Yes, I am. I am.
And while you're bringing that up, there was a comment from Raphael. He says, let's see, I vote for more resolution in the time domain. 8K is super for stills, as we're both talking about. That's good. High frame rate is a true advancement for me. 24 frames per second is 100 years old. He's dead on. And I do want to mention this too, because I think it's a forgotten segment when we talk about this, are the gamers.
Yeah.
We talk about zooming and cropping and being able to zoom in on architectural drawings and all these things. But man, if you're playing a first person shooter and you can zoom in through your scope and kill the guy way over here, he never saw you. I think that's pretty cool. And high frame rate for the gamers is going to be awesome. And we're seeing a lot of gamer friendly features in HDMI 2.1. So Raphael, I totally agree with you. And you know, we have to think about it like this. The HDMI spec, we can do 120 frames per second. So if we're dealing with systems that are not 8K capable, they can do 4K 120, which I think in a different aspect will really help too. High frame rate's a game changer. I mean, I know you've seen it. We've seen some movies at 60 frames per second. The movies are unfortunately not that good, but they look interesting. So you know, again, you mentioned it before. If you're not dealing with a giant screen, it might not make any sense. But having the bandwidth to do higher frame rate makes a lot of sense, no matter what the resolution is. So
Yes.
if we can do
Overhead. Always
8K,
overhead.
right? If we can do 8K, we can do 4K 120. And in the HDMI spec, at least the HDMI spec calls for 10K. So even stuff that you're shooting, you know, 2-3 years ago might fit into 10K one of these days. So, you know, we have all these conversations about spatial versus temporal resolution, and they're both important. I think the application is what's most important, and when do you do which one? And it just depends on, if you're an integrator, at least it just depends on your customer and what they do and what they watch and what their room is like and all these things. But the fact that we can teach them now the things that you're doing and guys like you were doing years ahead of the time, we can say, hey, look, you know, a lot of this content is done at these high resolutions. We're just not able to see it yet, but we will one day. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on higher frame rates and stuff like that too.
Well, yes, the point with gaming, I think, is a very good point. So the having an 8K screen connected to a gaming PC, for example, um, is now and in the near future. I mean, it's getting better and better. We
Hmm.
know that the rendering is really done differently in games than it is done with movies, and you have these kind of ray tracing and anti-aliasing
Hmm.
techniques, and the textures are getting better and better. A lot of things are actually happening. But imagine you have this 8K screen connected to the gaming PC, and now you can make your screen wider. I mean, we are now
Right.
seeing these 32 by 9
Yeah.
or 32 by 10 screens, for example. You can do the
Right.
exact same thing on an 8K screen, and
Right.
just leave something empty. And you could also have another view. It's not happening too much right now, but
Hmm.
we always need to push the. I'm a fan of infrastructure.
Oh,
so
okay. You're
so
talking. Yeah, you're talking to the right person.
so yeah, and your devices, by the way, it's amazing. I mean, I when I saw that you can do 8K over fiber,
Yeah,
and
it's wild.
I can imagine being in the basement of the house and firing up 8K to another room. that's
Hmm.
amazing. I mean, that's
Yeah,
I can connect it to my PC with all the photos on it, which is most
sure.
likely not in the, like, it's not in the living room, right? But maybe I want to see the pictures in the living room. So, I like these things. I like infrastructure. I like, when there's some additional bandwidth to it. And
Yeah,
I think you are offering, AV Pro is offering a lot of good products in
yeah,
that aspect. And I can't wait to actually try that here, with a fiber connection to the living
sure.
room. That's something I really want to experience.
And shameless plug. This isn't meant to be a sales presentation, but we are shipping 8K stuff right now. We've had the 8K test equipment now for a long time. We have 8K switches now. We have the 8K fiber extender. We have 8K distribution amplifiers. So we're running into the same problems now that we were years ago, where we had systems that were capable of 1080p all day, every day, but you introduce a 4K source and a 4K television, but the infrastructure is not there. So we have these little workarounds, like using splitters and using small matrix switches. All your sources go to the switch, audio goes to the AVR, AVR does what it's supposed to do audio-wise. I keep telling people all the time too, we have high resolution audio, and we've had that for a long time. That came way before the video. So if you have a AV receiver that maybe can't do the resolution that you need, it's almost guaranteed it can do the audio that you need. So let's send the receiver just the audio, let's send the TV just the video, and let's get around the constraints of the infrastructure. We see a lot of times too where somebody, an integrator, they've pre-wired a home with Cat5 years ago because that's what was common, but we're not at a point right now where Cat5 is just not going to do it anymore. So we teach a lot of people, like, go ahead and put in fiber. It's going to be able to do these resolutions. As I said, that the CES, we were doing 284 meters of fiber playing 4K 120
That's
games.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's nuts. And speaking of bandwidth, I think I don't know if you guys are, somebody may have mentioned that the camera was kind of cutting out again. If it does it again, let's go ahead and kill the cameras. But I think we're okay for right now. Somebody had mentioned Avatar 2 was difficult to sit through because we were just talking about frame rates.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a couple of things with Avatar 2. I was very excited to see it. I was excited to see the first one. I think if 3D is done well, it's still really, really cool. And I think that that's the golden example of what 3D should be. So in my area here, I have, it was IMAX 3D with variable frame rates. So I couldn't get all three. There were no theaters around me I could do all three. So I decided to go IMAX 3D without the frame rate. Did you happen to see it in the variable frame rate?
Shame on me. No, I didn't. I had.
I couldn't. Like, literally, there's no theaters around me that could. So I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
constrained to the theater.
But of course, I have swords on the high frame rate. There are so many stereotype opinions about it. Some people like it, some people hate it. I think it's good to have, again, the infrastructure. It's the same for the
Mhm.
gaming. If you
Right,
have the infrastructure, you can make a creative decision about how to use this infrastructure. If
right,
if you want to have high frame rate, if that's your you know goal, then let's go for the high frame rate. If you want to see
right.
the high resolution, it really depends on the content as well.
Absolutely.
And I think there is, you cannot say 24p is a bad thing, because
Right.
in so many movies it makes just a lot of sense, and you
Sure.
want to see the motion shutter. I'm sorry to say, but the creative intent, for some movies it does not work when you have the soap opera effect, when
It doesn't
everything
look
is,
like a movie.
yeah, the explosion, for example, sometimes the explosions, if you have them in a high frame rate, they don't they don't look like,
Yeah.
they don't create the same kind of immersive feeling sometimes. And uh,
Right.
um so at the end of the day, it should be a creative decision. And if the
Hmm.
filmmaker says, I want to do this in high frame rate because I'm shooting a sports event and I want to see every little, position, every position of the ball, like the football, whatever it is, then it makes sense. But in some other scenarios, it just doesn't make sense. And that's why we have this filmmaker mode,
Right.
that
Yeah.
it doesn't do any motion jitter reduction or so.
Hmm.
It is important to follow the creative intent,
Yeah.
and sometimes the intent is high frame rate, sometimes the intent is high resolution. So maybe you have
Right.
the beautiful landscapes and you want to see the resolution. You have these aerial views, whatever. Then
Hmm.
the intent is the high resolution. Then if you have sports events, the intent is the high frame rate or gaming.
Right.
It really depends. And having the infrastructure, having a TV, having a graphics card, having a switcher, whatever that is capable of doing all of whatever is needed creatively
Hmm.
is the answer in my opinion.
The one thing I wanted to ask you about, and our mutual friend Dave McKenzie and I have had small conversations about this, but when you're taking, say, a movie that was originally 1080p, like maybe Avatar, and you're upscaling it to 8K, what does that process look like? In other words, how does the process, how does it know what to do with the pixels? So I did a little bit of research on, I think there was one method called like nearest neighbor. Does that ring a bell, or am I saying that right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of maybe AI involved, and I'm
No,
sure
not the
there's
nearest
very
neighbor.
easy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What I should say is that's a different method, right?
Yes.
So, and there's probably, and I can say this fairly confidently, and tell me if I'm wrong, but there are very kind of easy, inexpensive ways to remaster, and there's probably some very difficult, time-consuming, very expensive ways. And I'll give you the example I know off the top of my head. The 2008 Blu-ray copy of The Matrix was terrible. I mean, it was absolutely awful. But when they redid it in 2020, it looked very, very, very good. And it seems that it's just a time and money thing.
It
And
is.
I'm guessing that older films might be done very quickly and cheaply, just so they can say, "Oh, it's 8K now," but then others might take the time.
Yes, absolutely. So, I faced this many, many times with the topic of HDR, of course. So many movies are originally mastered and finished basically in SDR, or let's
Right.
say a little bit more than SDR, because when you have a master that was playing in a theater and it has more bit depth than what your consumer deliverables have,
Sure.
and people took great care of not clipping the highlights. For example, you can reconstruct what's in there, and it, some of it can be done for 8K as well. And the problem really is to make a scene by scene decision. So, for example, if you have
Hmm.
these titles, if you have an HD movie and there's a title, subtitle, whatever, if there's text, you need to do some anti-aliasing when you do the upscale, because if you do like some nearest
Right.
neighbor, which is basically copying the pixel, multiplying the pixel, or even if you do BQ, big bilinear scaling, whatever, you maintain the edges, and when you upscale from 2K to something higher, you don't want to see the edges, but
Sure.
still you need to make decisions about what really looks still like as intended. Where is the benefit? And it's
Sure.
hard
Sure.
for a TV to make the decisions on the fly.
Yeah.
But I think the processors are getting better and better.
Yeah.
And there's always, this discussion about, do we need an 8K TV, for example? And the reality is these 8K TVs have the best processors, the most powerful
Right.
processors,
Yeah. Right.
and the most powerful backlight. And
Hmm.
and the cost actually, is not higher not much higher when you have an LCD screen that's in 4K or in 8K. That's not the
Sure.
difference in the price. It makes nearly no difference in the manufacturing. What makes the difference is the processor, the backlight, and all of
Hmm.
these things.
The engine.
So the engine, exactly. So the decision about having an 8K TV or not is the decision for the engine, in my opinion. It's not,
Yeah.
so many people are discussing, like, we don't need, I don't see 8K, I don't need 8K, whatever. That's really not the point. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you heard of this, but EU was, in the EU, we all also, we almost had the situation where there is no 8K TV sellable to the market anymore.
Hmm.
I don't know if you heard this. This was because of
Oh yeah.
energy
The energy.
consumptions. Yes. Um, Luckily, manufacturers were able to solve this issue by just introducing some eco mode, some out of the box lower power consumption
Yeah.
mode, which makes the picture dimmer, but still very acceptable. And you still have the opportunity to go into the menu and turn the full power back on.
I saw that very recently too, that I had to switch cameras. My other camera was yelling at me about the battery.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about high resolution, and I'm using my webcam in the computer, of course.
Oh yeah.
The thing I always think is funny is they're saying they're going to get around it by putting the TV out of the box into some sort of eco mode, like you say, with ambient light sensors turned on, and that's the same as right now anyway. But I think they're just going to mandate it probably, right? But as soon as you turn off the ambient light sensor and take it out of the energy savings mode, it's bright again anyway. But coming from a calibrator point of view, I run into, I'd say 90% of the people I calibrate for never even took it out of that mode. So you do have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people out there who are still watching that mode. I could see how it
I know.
might save some energy with when you scale it up to that many people,
But
but
yes,
it's
for
just
those
it's
people, who basically don't do anything to the picture, just
right.
open up the box and use it as is. Trust,
Sure.
not for those people. The question really is, should they get an 8K TV?
Right.
Yeah, because in my opinion, that's really for people who care about the highest, uh, the best image quality on LCD screens.
Right.
And so that's when you purchase like this 8K TV. It's not this out of the box situation. And
Hmm.
that's, it's somehow crazy to hear someone purchased a very expensive TV, no matter if 8K or not, and then keeps it in the out of the box mode. That's,
Yeah.
somehow ridiculous.
I know, and the it's, I mean, we've done lots of measurements, and we see as much as 60-75% more light output just by turning off the ambient light sensor and taking it out of eco mode. But I get it. I mean, the engines have to be more powerful, the processors have to be more powerful, the backlight has to be more powerful. So of course it's going to save a lot of energy. But my argument with the whole energy savings thing is we've made such strides with energy savings. Um, for the longest time, I was running at home a Panasonic Plasma, and you add that with, I'm a big 2-channel guy, as you know, and got some Macintosh stuff with tubes. And, you start doing tubes and analog and plasmas and things like that, and they do get warm. And one of the arguments
Yes.
was, back in the day, was that the TV would be in vivid mode and it would use a lot of energy and it would get really hot. And we would say, calibrating the TV helps you save energy. And there was some truth to that. I mean, that was part of it, of course. But now we have the opposite issue where they're coming out of the box dim and energy savings turned on. And then we brighten it up and make it look better after it's
Yeah,
calibrated.
there are a lot of regulations, and not all of them make sense. Some of them I really, the energy regulations for the TVs in general, saving energy is a good thing. But the point is, if a TV that doesn't have 8K resolution but is very cheap and has global dimming, for example,
Right.
um, passes the tests, and an 8K TV who has local dimming and can be much more effective in many and produces more light cannot pass the tests. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
Um,
It seems like such a weird place to concentrate on energy savings is TVs. And I get it because everyone has a TV and they're in every home now. I mean, when I was a kid, we had a TV in the living room, that was it. And a 25 or 27 inch, or even man, if you were really balling out, you're 32, 36 inches on a TV back then. But it just to me, it just seems like a kind of a strange category of things to concentrate on when it comes to energy savings. But I see why they're doing it. And you take one TV and multiply it by everyone on your street, everyone in the neighborhood, everyone in the city, and I get it, it adds up pretty quickly. But I mean, I just feel like if you want to save some energy, maybe turn off the TV and go outside and take your dog for a walk. I mean, I don't know.
see, I can tell you how I do it. Here I have this HX310 monitor, which is
Yes.
basically a heater. Okay,
Uh-huh.
this
Uh-huh.
this has a lot of power draw. What I did
Right.
is I put out some solar panels,
Hmm.
and I have a battery, and that saves the energy from the solar panels. And now I'm running off grid with
Yeah.
the post production.
Yeah. I'm in Florida, and we're the Sunshine State, and I feel like I don't see enough solar panels. Um, we should have more, and I think it has a lot to do with the government and who gets tax credits and all these other things. But I have a friend of mine in particular. He has a few panels up on his house, and it's enough to run his AV equipment, all of his networking and internet stuff at his house. Is it going to run the microwave and the stove and the oven? Not yet, but maybe maybe one day as the panels get more efficient and things of that type. But I very much admire what you're doing because that's really the problem solvers right there. We get to renewable energies, then this is a non-conversation, and now we can do
Exactly.
10K TVs and 120 frames and 85 inches no problem and things like that. But it's a process, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but
Sure.
the awareness of around the energy savings, I think I can appreciate, but also the video file, audio file, professional AV guy in me is like, this is kind of weird.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't purchase a TV for maybe 5,000, 6,000 dollars, and
Right?
then don't use the picture quality of it,
I know. Yeah.
because I want to save energy. That's not a
That's
good
the least thing on your
decision.
mind. Well,
Yeah.
and I think they have this where you are, and you tell me, but when you go into a big box store here, it has the Energy Star sticker in yellow going down the side of the TV. And I remember looking at plasmas back in the day, and it would say, this TV cost $96 per year to run.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
you're seeing an OLED, for example, $16 maybe. So
Right.
it's like we've come such a long way. Like, how much more can we keep trimming to make it better? But and the percentage of people who are going to leave it in that energy savings mode is very high anyway. Um,
Right.
and it's better than nothing.
Sure.
Yeah. I did want to ask you too. We got a few more minutes left here. If you guys have some questions, by the way, if you're listening live, if you have some questions, just put them into the chat box there, or the question box. We'll be happy to get to them. I have some questions that might be slightly more technical. We don't have to go too crazy. But it started to. We talked earlier about different methods of upscaling, and it really started making me get more curious on what are the different methods. And the one that kept popping up that maybe seemed to be the easiest was the whole nearest neighbor idea. So maybe we could take a few minutes and touch on the different methods of upscaling and what some of those actually mean. I don't know if
Well,
that's worth
okay,
getting
so
into.
this now comes entirely from my head. Normally, I would prepare for something like that, but let's do it like this. Nearest neighbor is basically you take the pixel that is closest to the position that you want to fill. Okay, so this is not a good method because it's basically multiplying the the pixels, and there's no additional detail. There is no smoothing going on with nearest neighbor. It is basically, you know, 1 pixel gets the size of 4 pixels.
Okay, so it's basically just filling in the empty holes.
Yes.
With pixels
yes.
that are already in the content anyway, or in
I
the
would
medium
say
anyway.
that's maybe the worst method of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have what do we have? Bilinear, bicubic, and you know, some of them are smoother and some of them have more details, you know, more harder edges. Okay,
Right.
and so you can play around it basically when you use Photoshop. You can upscale an image and change the upscaling method, and you will see bilinear and bicubic is, you know, it depending on the settings, it is just more sharper or smoother. That's um, some of it is upscaling, some of it is downscaling. I need to remember what was it. I think it was bilinear smoother, which is good for upscaling, right? And but you know, basically, don't take my word on that. The major thing here is those are very easy mathematic methods, which have a fixed effect. Okay, and the thing that you really want to do is you want to do some anti-aliasing. In order, because you, when you upscale something and you have a jagged edge, and that jagged edge is sometimes flickering because it's moving, so you have this kind of flickering going on. You really want to do some anti-aliasing to avoid this kind of flickering and avoid seeing the pixel structure without compromising, and that's the point, without compromising the picture detail. Because what you could also do is like, hey, let's upscale and then use like a Gaussian filter to blur it a little bit so you don't see these, but that is not a good upscaling then. So basically, in my opinion, what you want to do is a sharp after upscaling after you applied some anti-aliasing. But it really depends on the material. You probably don't need the anti-aliasing and can go for the bilinear smoother, for example, when there is a material that doesn't have these edges in it. Yeah, if the material is smooth anyway, anti-aliasing won't do anything. So yeah, maybe that helps.
It seems like that's a good method for maybe hiding artifacts, if anything, that were in the original media.
And then the next method, of course, is AI upscaling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as said initially, AI upscaling basically means that, you know, whenever there is something that can be filled using artificial intelligence, there might be a new texture to it, or even the method of upscaling might be changed according to the scene. Right. So these two things can basically happen with artificial intelligence, changing the method, maybe even from, you know, in this picture segment, do this method, in that picture segment, do that. Yeah, and scene detection, all of that goes into AI upscaling. And AI upscaling is the next best thing after doing it manually with a lot of sense to, you know, what's happening in the picture. You know, if you have the different methods and tools, the best thing, of course, is to make a decision scene by scene and carefully make sure that you don't have any artifacts and maintain the original picture as good as possible.
So just like everything else, it's time and money.
It is time and money, and if you want to do it right, you need to spend time with it. That's the point.
Something caught my attention a moment ago. So let's say, for example, I did have a still image. We'll start simple. If I had a still image that maybe was 1920 by 1080, I could put that image into Photoshop and I could upscale it to a higher resolution. And that's just something you
Yes.
can do within Photoshop. There's different
Yes.
probably settings and methods that you said.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
For those of you who are listening, if you have Photoshop, I would experiment. Just go in and play around and take some low res photos and try to upscale and see what they look like. Throw them up on your
Right.
giant 77-inch OLED and zoom in and take a look at the artifacts if there are any. And if the upscaling is good enough, there might not be any until you zoom in really, really, really close.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm finding interesting right now, and this might not be, it just was something that popped into my head a moment ago, not totally relevant to what we're talking about, but I can take a photo with my phone right now, and maybe it's a landscape of a beach and there's 2 or 3 people on the beach. I can go in afterwards and I can erase the people, and
Yes.
the intelligence of the software will fill in the gaps. So
Yes.
what I'm guessing is that you get rid of the people, and the algorithm or the software looks and says, okay, well, if I get rid of these people around here, and to the left and to the right and to the north and the south of these people is sand, then there must be sand behind them. So it gets rid of the people and fills in the image with sand because you're on a beach. So it's
Yes.
guessing, which is what kind of upscaling and processing is anyway, is just guesswork, which is why processors are so important, and we spend money on better processing.
I think this area of filling content, you know, reducing artifacts, sometimes you compress details away, right? You have block artifacts and everything. This is now massively exploding with AI. This is,
Right.
if you heard about like stable diffusion or so, you basically have, you can have a text input and have wonderful, there's Midjourney, for example, there, and there's a lot of stable diffusion going on. And basically, you tell the computer, here is an area that I would like to fill with this and that, because the surrounding area is sand, the surrounding area has these and these colors, and it fills it, and it does it perfectly. It looks so
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. I mean, this
It's
whole
crazy.
topic of AI in the beginning of this year, I was so blown away. I needed a couple of days to recover from what's going on there. Actually, it's
like what's going to happen, and there may be some form of this already, but another thing I was talking about with our mutual friend Dave McKenzie is, how do you, in an efficient way, how do you get rid of physical flaws in film stock? So in other words, you take a movie from the 1930s and it was not stored very well, it was not handled very carefully. So it makes me wonder if, you transfer the individual frames into a computer, and the computer can easily recognize like a scratch in the film or a piece of dust on the film compared to something that is supposed to be in the film. And how it knows the difference is where my mind starts to go, it's
well,
really cool.
that is already happening.
Yeah, I kind of
So
figured.
yeah, so I've done some cleanups and for movies, and so I had film scans with basically the infrared channel,
Mm,
and because that's where it makes a big difference in the quality of how you can remove scratches. If you have the
sure.
infrared channel, it tells you, hey, there is a hole or there's an object on the film, and now you need to fill it somehow. And this is now starting to be done with the help of AI as well.
Mhm.
It it the normal way how you do it is you use content of the next adjacent frames. So
Yeah.
basically,
Oh, does it compare?
here's a hole, and the frame before has information, at this position. So take that information basically,
Hmm.
and fill it,
Hmm.
fill it in. You don't need to do it on a frame by frame basis because you have a motion picture. You
Right,
can
right.
compare and bring back together some frames to fill that space. But yes, this is getting more and more advanced, and some tools. For example, I'm using the Diamond suite, which is a very expensive and great software tool. which also has my anti-aliasing plugin implemented to it. So I have built an anti-aliasing plugin which runs in Resolve and also runs in
Sure.
this Diamond suite. Um, it does a lot of this already automatically. So you basically make some pre-decisions about what the material is all about and how you want to fix the errors to, it's happening on a frequency domain, for example.
Sure.
I want to replace spots up to this size, and I want to detect spots starting at this size, and so on and so forth. So I want to use
Yeah.
2 frames or 1 frame adjacent. These kind of things happen a lot on a like automatic basis or semi-automatic basis. But also, if you look for the artifacts, there are some artifacts sometimes you need to do some manual work
Sure.
as well. But I think this will get better and better. The problem for AI at this point is looking at motion picture sequences. It
Sure.
normally looks at one image, and then, like you described, here are some people on the beach, and let's remove them. It works for one image, but if this is a if this is a video clip, it's much harder to do.
Yeah.
And I think we will see it soon, things like that, which are normally done professionally in post-production. But AI will help us, even in our mobile phones, to do it.
I tell you, man, what's really fun for me, and I've really noticed this in the past few years because we've had all these remasters to UHD and HDR, and man, just watching some of these films that I really enjoyed as a kid, seeing them now on a bigger screen in HDR with high res. I mean, a good example, if you guys haven't seen it already, if you're at all a fan of Wizard of Oz, check out the remaster. I mean, the whoever worked on that did a fantastic job. I mentioned Jaws before, that's another good one. But seeing these movies now, it's we always say this in our world, but when we have a format update, but it's like seeing it again for the first time, and it really truly is seeing these movies now. It's been a lot of fun watching the old stuff.
Yeah. So that for me, it is also fun to work on movies like that. I mean, I work on very current movies. There's one that is currently nominated for a few Oscars. We will see if it gets it. That's Triangle of Sadness, and I did an HDR version of it, which looks really fantastic. I
Yeah.
like it a great deal. And I'm also on the Three Musketeers,
Oh
which
yeah.
was shot here in about 10 years ago in my hometown.
Oh, cool.
Parts of it are shot
Yeah.
here, so I'm very enthusiastic on working on that one as well. But it's fun, and I always enjoy the additional amount of information that is maintained, from like the original capture, and so I always work on it, like, making sure that the creative intent is not hurt, but also making sure that we use the dynamic range of what is possible today with HDR, and differentiating the highlights and differentiating the shadows, and
Yeah.
it's great fun for me, actually. I'm very pleased to work in that area.
Well, it's I have so much respect for you and what you do, because it is part art, part science, and those two things normally have a hard time living together. But
Right, thank you.
the fact that you're using the science and you're using the software and you're using all these tools, but at the same time you have to look at it from an artistic point of view and say, you have to make decisions sometimes, and some of those decisions must be pretty hard. Do we preserve the detail and do this, or do we, X, Y, Z example? So, making those decisions and working with people and trying to figure out the best compromises to get these projects done in a certain amount of time and a certain amount of budget. I mean, we look at things and we go, oh, I wish they could have done this a little bit better. I wish they could have done that a little bit better. In a perfect world, we have all the time and all the budget, but you know, we have to get things done. And the fact that we're seeing some of these old movies now done really well is really special to me as a movie lover. And one other thing I'll mention too about older movies, I've been watching some black and white stuff from film on an OLED in a pitch black room. Dude, that is special. It is really, really. There's a couple of seasons of Twilight Zone, and I don't know,
Yeah,
I can't remember if it's Netflix or whichever streaming service, but I
yeah.
love that show as a kid, and watching it now in really good HDR with the right white point on a really good monitor in a dark room. It's whoa, it's super cool.
I
Yeah,
agree, and there's so much information in some of these, you know, especially black and white
sure.
movies. That there is resolution. There's also dynamic range many times,
Tons and
and
tons.
and and that's amazing to see because I mean people in the theater never have seen this quality before, and
Right.
you get to experience it again. I mean, I started this with scanning medium format pictures, even black and white pictures of my, you know, that my parents and grandparents did, and
Mhm.
scanning them and bringing them to the screen, even in HDR. That's so fantastic to see.
That's cool.
There's so much information in these old images. Sometimes you can't believe it. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you know, film, infinite dynamic range, right? And then you're on an OLED with, you know, we can call it maybe infinite, and you're in a dark room that's light controlled, so you have a lot of dynamic range there, and it just, man, it just looks really cool and it's a lot of fun. But Florian, we could go all day. I love talking to you.
Yeah.
Sorry about the little audio issues for you guys who are watching live. I'll cut some of that stuff out at the very beginning for the YouTube cut of this video. But if you have any questions for Florian or myself, feel free, shoot me an email, jason@murideo.com, and I'll get those questions filtered to Florian. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about upscaling or 8K or what, or maybe you just want to share some stories about some things you're seeing out there in the field, maybe some stuff you're living with at home already, and you want to share maybe some movies that you've seen or maybe some TV shows that you've seen that you really enjoy, let us know, because I want to go watch them myself. I'm always looking for good recommendations on content. So if you guys have any of those or just general questions, just hit me up, jason@murideo.com. Florian, tons of fun. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. It
And
was a big pleasure and great fun to talk to you.
yeah, any last words on 8K, what we should be looking for in the next maybe 6 to 12 months? Anything we should be really excited about?
Well, for me, it's really connecting small computers like a Mac Mini, a MacBook Pro.
Yeah,
You know, that is game changing for me
yeah,
because it really it makes it accessible. And
right.
looking into that, you know, and browsing through photos, you know, that you've collected over the time is so much fun, and it's worth the time to make it happen.
Yeah, good, good. Um, so if people wanted to look up your work and maybe plug your website and where people can find some maybe some YouTube and things like that with you on it, where should they go?
Simply ff.de, and I should I should make a couple of new pages and update some of the pages. So maybe next week, you know, starting
Yeah,
from next week,
sure.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah, good. Okay, well, thanks again. Thanks for you guys for listening live. When I get the YouTube video posted, feel free to share it with your colleagues who maybe couldn't watch live. But thanks again, Florian. I'm sure we'll talk real soon.
Thank you, Jason.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.